Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left Jagannath Puri, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who had recently been converted to a Vaishnava after having been a very famous scholar of Mayavadi, had met the very young sannyasi, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was 24 years old at the time, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was so venerable and respected all over the world for his scholarship. And when he first encountered the young sannyasi in the hall of Lord Jagannath, at the Lord Jagannath temple, he had been impressed by his beauty, and he attested to see if his faint, that is, Mahaprabhu's lying on the ground in his seeming state of ecstasy, was genuine. Those who were custodians of the temple doubted it. Many times people come and imitate the ecstatic symptoms, and they have to be shooed away with a stick. So they were were the custodians, to take the stick to the beautiful form of the Lord. When by Lord Chaitanya's arrangement, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya happened to be there and told them to stand back. And as he tested the Lord by putting a small bit of cotton fiber in front of his nostrils, he could see that his breath was there but suspended. What's more, Sarvabhauma, although he wasn't a Vaishnava, he was aware of all Vaishnava scriptures as well as all other scriptures of the world. And he had ascertained that this young sannyasi was in a state of deep spiritual ecstasy. So he called upon his students to come and pick up the beautiful body of the Lord and bring it back to his own residence, which we'll visit soon, if everyone can cancel anything else you have going on. We'll be in Jagannath Puri next month. And there he had conversations with Gopinath Acharya, who is well acquainted with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Godhead. And after wanting to do good for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Bhattacharya, not convinced of his godhood, but still very much taken by this beautiful sannyasi, had wanted to upgrade his level of sannyas. He said, "You've taken sannyas in a lower order, so I'll arrange for it. You'll get a second initiation into sannyas, and we'll upgrade that for you." Much to the chagrin of Gopinath Acharya and the other followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, have found that idea abhorrent. What to speak of Nityananda Prabhu, who had even broken Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's danda based on the fact that the varnashrama is an external idea. And what is a Paramahamsa, what to speak of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, have to do with carrying around the symbol of the sannyas, or the varnashram, the āśrama of sannyas. Nonetheless, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, being very submissive and purposeful in his submission, had agreed to sit with the Bhattacharya for some time to hear his explanation of Vedanta. And after 7 days of speaking continuously, which Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was perfectly capable of without stoppage because he was so learned, he noticed increasingly that this young sannyasi was not responding. There were no questions, and there were not even any reflections. And he asked them, "Do you have some response? Do you have some question?" "No," he said. "Do you not understand the meanings that I'm conveying about the Vedanta Sutras. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I perfectly understand the Vedanta Sutras. It's just that your explanation is covering their true meaning, just like a cloud would cover the sun. To which the very well-honored teacher, much advanced in age compared to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was taken aback, as one might imagine. And in that interim, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he invited him to give his own explanations, which he did. And he also asked the Bhattacharya to say something about the āśrama verse, to which the Bhattacharya very expertly, as someone that learned could do, comprised 7 verses about the āśrama verse, all unique and on the spot. And then he asked Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to say something, and he then covered 24 different meanings without touching the original meaning that Bhattacharya had given to the Vedanta Sutra, to the āśrama verse. And increasingly within the mind of the Bhattacharya, because he was an intellectual, and we find Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preached in different ways to different people, appropriately, as is the process recommended by Rupa Goswami, yena tena prakarena mana Krishna niveshaya. One way or another devise means that people can come to this consciousness of thinking of Krishna. And so the Bhattacharya, realizing the brilliance of this young man, then began to change his idea about his identity, until in his heart he surrendered to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and submitted himself, at which time Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed his form of Sadbhuj, and according to Chaitanya Bhagavat, his other Narayan form. At that time in Chaitanya Bhagavat, it is said by Vrindavan Das Thakur that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him, so now do you still think I'm not qualified for sannyas? You can laugh. So, from that very day, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya became a Vaishnava. He had been a Mayavadi. And the next morning, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was returning from Mangalarti, he came to the house of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, detecting that the Lord was just coming into his courtyard in his house, and who had just risen from bed, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu simultaneously could hear him chant Krishna as he awoke. And then he came, did the Bhattacharya, and offers obeisances to the Lord. The Lord had brought Mahaprasadam straight from the Jagannath temple and had given it to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Now in the Smriti Shastras, there are various regulations for smartas who follow these scriptures meticulously, that you're not to touch anything, but to speak of eat something just after rising from bed. Anybody come from a background like that? Nobody has been burdened with that? We have met others who've been through such a rigorous upbringing, and they can very much relate to how stiffly people who adhere to that hold these certain rules and regulations. So it was noticeable when the Bhattacharya then offered obeisances, got up, accepted the Mahaprasad, and immediately took it. And he, of course, knowing all the Shastras, said, Nadesha niyamas tatra, nakala niyamas tatra, tata, praptamanam ducham shishir bhuktarim har abravit. The Bhattacharya declared that if Mahaprasadam is brought from a distant country, even if it's stale, dried up, doesn't look appealing, you should honor it immediately as soon as you receive it. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then could see that the conversion was complete. He had a soft heart. He could appreciate and honor Mahaprasadam. So it wasn't more than a month after this time, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would come to Jagannath Puri and achieved the miracle of converting one of the most popular spiritual figures in all of India to his own brand of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And the word spread everywhere, of course. And Bhattacharya had become very much attached to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had announced first to his intimate associates that he would be leaving for South India to do a tour, to find his brother. He said to him, I know my brother has taken sannyas somewhere in South India, and a pretext of ignorance was required because he knew, did Lord Chaitanya, that his brother had already passed. But he used this as an excuse to go out to preach. After telling his intimate associates, he had then gone to, let me just turn that a little bit, sorry. He had gone to the home of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and told him of his intention to leave Jagannath Puri, at which time Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya greatly lamented and said, I've just now met you after uselessly spending my whole life in dry speculation, and now finally. And of course, Sarvabhauma had shown such spiritual enthusiasm that in reading the Bhagavat, he wanted to change from mukti to bhakti in the verse Tatenu kampam susamikshamanu bunjani vatmakritam vipakam grid vagvapurvir viradam namaste jiveta yo mukti. Because Mayavadis relate to this idea of mukti as being the ultimate goal, then it sounded abhorrent to Sarvabhauma. This also is a sign of his change of heart. He said, I'm going to change you to bhakti. This is too disturbing to have this word here. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu convinced Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya that mukti also means the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And besides that, you can't go around changing the Bhagavatam. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, in that very soft-hearted mood, had heard the declaration of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that he would be leaving to go preach in South India. Who knows in those days when somebody would come back, how would they come back, how would you stay in touch? It was very difficult. And to know where people were, just word of mouth, basically. And so he begged the Lord that at least stay a few days in my house before you leave. And Mahaprabhu had accommodated him in that. It's noted there that he was so, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, soft-hearted and attached to his devotees that he was controlled by them, by their love. But when Mahaprabhu was ready for his final departure to South India, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had, at the last moment, assailed him and said, one thing I want to mention. When you come to this place where we are now, he said, when you reach this place, there is a great Vaishnava there. I used to criticize him because I thought, who are these sentimentalists? And I didn't understand his brand of spirituality, but now I understand. And he said, please do not neglect him. Come to see Ramananda Roy. Don't neglect him because he's a governor. He's considered a Shudra. You should know that he's fit, said Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to associate with you. So, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that Ramananda Roy is fit to associate with you. And Mahaprabhu, when he came to this place, this ghat, he sat and first took his bath and sat down in a prayerful way. And there was some pageantry indicated by music playing, then a retinue of people dressed in royal dress and carrying a personality on a palanquin. And that personality was Srila Ramananda Roy, who was the governor of this region. And he was surrounded by soldiers and by other politicians and definitely panegyrists. That was a position at the time that you could take up, as you could have a major in that. MIT even had it. So when he came and was descending to the river to take his bath, as per the regulations of the Shastra, exactly how to enter a holy place, how to take a bath. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu observed him, and in his heart, he was wishing to meet with Ramananda Roy. It was spontaneous. After Ramananda had taken his bath, and he saw that the sannyasi was there, he came to meet him. And there was a spontaneous attraction, because in Krishna Lila, so Ramananda Roy is Vishaka Devi, who's the most intimate associate of Srimati Radharani, and of course in the esoterics of understanding Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we find that Radha Krishna Pranaya Vikritir Hladini Shakti Rasma Ekat Manav Api Bhuvi Pura Deha. It's an ocean. If you're swimming in that ocean and then you come to the beach and you pull yourself up and you look, where will you be? And the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. Sort of like a reversible jacket. You can wear it on one side or the other. And Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura mentions in his commentaries in the Brahma Samhita, especially the verse Ananda Chinmayra Saprati Bhavita Tabirya Eva Nijarupa Taya Kalami. Goloka Eva Nivasatyaki Latma Bhuto Govindamari Purusham Tamaham Vajami. That the devotees, some are completely fascinated with Radha and Krishna. Others are fascinated with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, although, as they say in Thailand, same but different. And some are simultaneously attracted to Radha and Krishna and the Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And all rightly so, according to personal taste. So we know from the pastimes in the Bhagavatam of Krishna and his devotees that something great is about to happen when Krishna comes in contact with one of his devotees. And the place becomes memorialized or noted for a special meeting. For instance, Kurukshetra is most famous for what? Popularly, it's most famous for Bhagavad Gita, but for the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he'll say Kurukshetra is popular because of Krishna's going there during the eclipse of the sun and then meeting with Srimati Radharani and the gopis and his parents after over 100 years of separation. And he said it's the most consequential time because they come there to the gopis, to Srimati Radharani, and they're so close to the goal line that they miss it by this much because there's Krishna after so long, but actually we can't do that here. We can't feel the same ecstasy. We have to bring you back to Vrindavan. Therefore, Kurukshetra is known as a place where there was a great spiritual combination that took place there, and therefore it's worshipped for the idea that came out of that place, that's brought up by all the great acharyas, not the least of which is Ramananda Roy in this conversation. So we know in this place, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu meets Ramananda Roy, who's Vishaka, and there's going to be some very important conversation. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu summons the opinion of Ramananda Roy in this case, and he asks him to quote a verse that would indicate the ultimate goal of life. If you were going to do that, what would you say? Oh, yes, what would you say?
Hare Krishna. I believe the first one he says,
Well, I'm asking what you'd say.
I would say...
Just if we caught you at 1 o'clock in the morning, we woke you up and said, what's the most important verse in all the books that you know?
I would say Savai Pumsan Paro Dharma Yato Bhaktira Doksaje Aitukiya Patiya Yātrās.
That's pretty good. To have a ready answer like that is pretty rare. Because if you woke up 1,000 people around your town and asked them, you'd probably get shot, first of all. But second of all, people might not have any clue about what you're talking about. So one of the most important principles is that when there's the proper question asked to a qualified person, then the answer that comes is the great jewel. And this is compared to one of those auspicious meetings when there's confluence of the planets that allows for the greatest wealth to be produced. As we spoke the other day, in the ocean, during certain constellations, jewels and other precious things are produced according to rain falling on the head of serpents or touching the ocean. So in a similar way, we know something great's going to come from this conversation. So he did ask, and there were several suggestions by Ramananda Roy that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said were external, and he asked him to say more. First of which was Varnashrama. And in Varnashrama, of course, we have the verses that mention, and they're quoted there in this context of how Varnashrama is vital, because how else will one make advancement by living in the world and being pulled along by one's own nature unless one dedicates one's activities to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was not rejecting any of these things out of hand. He's just saying they're external, especially in the context of our conversation. And then Ramananda Roy says that you can dedicate everything to Krishna. Yat korosi yat ashnashi yat juhosi dadasi yat tapasyasi konteya tat kurishvam marapado. And Mahaprabhu again said that it's external. And then he says, okay, just give everything up then. Sarva dharman prityaja mam ekam sharanam braja aham tvam sarva papevyo. Mahaprabhu again, external. This says, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma, the Shochati Nakamshatik Samak Sarveshi Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param. Come to this transcendental position of Brahman, this indicating the path of Gyan. The others are karma, tyaga. And then he rejected that also as external. Because even the verse says, Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param. You're not in bhakti proper at this point, but you're only on the thresholds, about to enter in. But then he gives from the Brahma Stuti, as everyone here knows, the verse that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu first accepted, where he said, give up all speculative knowledge and just give yourself, body, mind, words, worshipping the sound vibration that comes from the pure devotees speaking Bhagavat. Jnane prayasam urapasyanamanta eva jivanti san karitam bhavadiya vartam stane stita shuti-gatam tanuvan manobhiraye prayaso jitta jito pyasitais trilokyam. And here, there's something very encouraging. We hear jivanti san mukaritam bhavadiya vartam. That jivanti means to live. So if the main purpose of your life is you're living just so that you can go to the next Bhagavatam class. Somehow or other you pull yourself together. Every other part of your life is a shambles. You couldn't make the 1600 on the SAT. Big lament. You couldn't get that job that you wanted in Silicon Valley right next to the temple. You had to go to Indiana or something like that. Whatever it may be, it doesn't matter. Jivanti sanmukaritam bhavadiya vartam. If you're able to stay alive to hear. And he also indicates whatever position you're in now, stane stita. You don't artificially have to change that. But Brahma is speaking this verse, and he's the smartest person. He scored in the 16 trillion on his SAT. And he says, don't try to understand Krishna through your intellect. Jnane prayasam udapase. Just completely give up that idea. And then jivanti sanmukharitam bhavati avartam. Stay in your position, stane stita, shrutigatam, and just hear. Tanu, with your body, man, with your mind, vano, with your words. All these ways glorify the sound vibration of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he says something which is indicative of the power of bhakti, which is that the ajita, Krishna, becomes jita because of being conquered by the devotee who takes up this process. This means it's a supreme process. So it very quickly progresses from that point, from one accepted point to the next, because Ramananda Roy then brings up the various relationships that one can have with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and discusses the qualities of those relationships that the devotees have with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in friendship and as parents, as lover, and as servants. And in each he talks about the qualities. So he's building to a pinnacle, the ultimate topic of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is mentioned in the first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Janmadhyasya Taha. And in it we hear Sridhar Swami, the great Bhagavatam commentator, talking about the purpose of Bhagavatam as bringing to light the āśrama. As we see in the material world, all the relationships here are consequential, but the most important is the loving relationship, male and female, the conjugal idea. And where does that idea come from? Says Sridhar Swami, Janmadhyasya Taha. It comes from Radha and Krishna in the spiritual world. And it's called the āśrama, or the original loving relationship that is the showcase for everybody in all rasas, which are all satellites from that Madhura ras, as mentioned in the Bhagavatam and the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, is pointing to that. And in discussing that, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu keeps asking for more and more details about that rasa, and then comes to a closing point, at which time Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, I think that you can say something more. I'm sensing that you know more than this. And Ramananda Roy then begins to talk about the topic of separation, union and separation. And this is one of the main topics that comes up at in the context of the Kurukshetra pastime of the gopis meeting Krishna after so many years. So that is a brief summary. In the course of describing the quality of devotional service, Ramananda Roy quotes some very important verses for our consideration along the way. And one of them is spoken by Kapila Dev. And in his description of devotional service, and the verse is in my head right now, so if you can pull it out, I'd appreciate it. He says, the quality of non-motivated devotional service, unmotivated devotional service, or devotional service that's beyond the three modes of material nature, is that as soon as one hears Krishna Katha, then one's mind pursues it. It's not an intellectual process, but it's quite natural because it's all attractive. And therefore the mind runs after it, or flows after it, he says, just like the Ganges can't be stopped, nor can the Godavari. You may try to put up a barrier, but it'll always conquer and go around and reach its destination. And so he said that this is the quality of advancement in devotional service that is provided by the process, that one's mind becomes so attracted to hearing that it flows after that conversation and can't be stopped for any reason. And then he also quotes a verse which indicates the price of admission, so to speak, for advancing in devotional service. Krishna bhakti ras bhavitomati kriyatam yadi kritopi labhyate tata lolyam api mulyam ekalam janmakoti sukritir nalabhyate. In this verse he talks about having great need or enthusiasm, or as some have said, this lolya means greed. And talking about greed, where does it come from? It comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As he has his own sense of intense desire or greed. And as is mentioned once by Gaur Govinda Maharaj, the whole progression of understanding how Krishna's appearance, he speaks about how in the various appearances of the Lord, he becomes greedy for the love of his devotees, and in each one of his appearances, for instance, as Lord Ramachandra, the sages of Dandakarana, which I understand is not too far from here. Is that true?
Between here and Nasik.
Between here and Rasik. And if we had a sense of greed, we'd get up right now and we'd go try to find that place. That the sages had desired that they would enter into a conjugal relationship with him, but he was in Maryada. So later he came to facilitate them, but it was out of his own greed to expand his relationships with his devotees. His own greed. So that same mood, that greed for devotional service, is indicated as, by Rupa Goswami, the price one must pay in order to achieve Krishna. Krishna bhakti ras bhavitomati kriyatam yadi kritopi labhyate tatalolyam api mulyam ekalam janmakoti sukritirn labhyate. He says, if it's available somewhere, that is bhakti, you should go there immediately and try to purchase it. And the purchasing price is this great eagerness. So this, Prabhupada talks about, is something that comes from this greed, the mercy of Krishna or the mercy of the Sri Guru Parampara. It's not something that can be manufactured, but if one even has a drop, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, of this sense of greed, this is the indicator that one is making advancement in devotional service, and will only increase over time. And Prabhupada gives an example. It's very commonplace, but it's very helpful in understanding that there is an interim period or an introduction period in Krishna consciousness when one follows the Shastra very carefully. This is Vaidhi. And also the orders of the spiritual master. In order that gradually the heart becomes cleansed of anarthas. And Prabhupada says, when you learn to type, which I did in New Delhi because I couldn't get a ticket back to America. This is pre-computer, and I didn't know how to type. Nirkula had to type everything for me. And I saw a little shop where this old guy had about 20 typewriters, and he offered a class for a week. And I just had a week before I caught my flight, so I went there and I took the class on typing. And he had a typing book that had been read many, many times. I could tell how worn it was. And had to learn where to put my fingers on on the keyboard. But gradually, by the third, fourth, fifth day, then sixth day, I was clack, 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 clack. And by the time I got on the plane, I could do 100 words. No, I'm just kidding. I had a sense for the keyboard. It was memory in my fingertips. And with a lot more practice, when I came home, I learned how to touch type. And now I just type. Sometimes somebody's talking to me, I can keep typing without looking. And so Prabhupada gives that example of, in the beginning, we take to the strict rules and regulations as given by the Shastra, showing how to perform devotional service. But then it becomes spontaneous, quite naturally, by the mercy of Krishna and the Guru. And then there's an unrestricted desire to worship Krishna. It's not governed by, you have to follow this rule or regulation. It flows the way the Ganges flows without stoppage. It can't be stopped by anything, and there's no consideration. It's just a natural pull of attraction between Krishna and the practitioner that's coming spontaneously. So the Ramananda Sambad, Prabhupada wrote a book about this conversation. And it was a manuscript that, one of the other manuscripts of the Light of the Bhagavat that wasn't published during Prabhupada's time. And this other one is a similar manuscript which was unfinished, but he had written a summary of the pastime of Ramananda Roy and Lord Chaitanya meeting here. And now we'll just take a few reflections or questions. Yes, bye.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I had a few questions. I heard Gaur Govind Swami say that what you were saying today as well, that Gaur Leela and Krishna Leela are non-different, except that in Gaur Leela, Radha and Krishna are in one body, and in Krishna Leela, they're in two bodies. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on this non-difference of Krishna Leela and Gaur Leela.
Yeah. In Vrindavan, the mood is called madhurya, or sweetness. And in Mayapur and Navadvip, it's the same Leela, as you're saying, same but different, because in Mayapur it's called audarya. And the description or metaphor for that is that sweetness is there, it's contained in Vrindavan, and people can come and drink from that with the proper approach. But in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela, audarya means generosity. And that same container that holds the sweetness is overflowing. There's so much there that it overflows its banks and it's pouring out and going everywhere. And this is the mood we see those devotees who are spontaneous in their practice of devotional service and who are followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Like Śrīla Prabhupāda took what he had and he made it overflow because it was overflowing from his heart. He gave that overflow to everybody, and that's what our Sankirtan is. It's bringing the sweetness of Vrindavan. It's there in the holy names and conception, conjugal mantra, as we heard last night. What's the best of songs? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram. But in the mood of Lord Chaitanya and his Leela, same personalities, Radha Krishna, but in one, and they're distributing it to everybody without considering who's a fit or unfit candidate. So that's the audarya aspect of that. And if you go deeply within Lord Chaitanya's Leela and you keep going, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is doing with Ramananda Roy, he said, okay, fine, but tell me more. Fine, tell me more. Deeper, then you'll find Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And if you go the other way into Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leela, then you'll find Radha and Krishna.
I had one more question, if I can ask.
Okay. They're extra. The second question is extra. Cost more. Go ahead.
In Nectar Devotion and in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada mentions that to get to that spontaneous love, it requires the removal of material contamination. He says that multiple times.
The what?
Material contamination.
Contamination.
He says that multiple times in the talks between Ramananda Roy and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as well, that to get to this level of spontaneous devotional service, or Raganuga Bhakti, to my understanding, that it requires anartha nivriti, or crossing the stage of anartha nivriti. I was wondering if you could give a specific reference for Raganuga Bhakti coming after anartha nivriti.
Well, it comes before and it comes after, because we're not practicing Vaidhi or rules and regulations for the sake of going to Vaikuntha. All of what we're doing, as per the instructions of Rupa and Sanatan, and as mentioned by Srinivasacharya, Sankhya-purvaka nama-gana nativi kalavasani krutau. If you look at the exemplars of devotional service in our main acharyas, Rupa, Sanatan, they followed very strictly. They counted their chanting. They counted everything, actually. They were measuring. Sankhya means measuring, means this is strictness in devotional service. But this is not an idea that will come to a different kind of mood in devotional service. And Jiva Goswami gives comment in his Sandarbha about how this is a jata ruchi raganuga sadhana bhakti. He says, before one has taste, there is a way that one is following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas and practicing the same things they're doing. They're following in their footsteps. And he says, even when achieves some sense of taste, then there should be an admixture, he says, of Vaidhi, which is what you see with the Goswamis. So, to make it really simple, spontaneous means spontaneous. It doesn't mean following a particular rule and regulation. But you can't calculate how to become spontaneous, because then you've just lost the very definition of the word itself. It comes naturally by mercy that comes down from Krishna and through the Guru. This is according to Śrīla Rupa Goswami himself. So we should be absorbed in following the kinds of bhakti practices that were given to us by our Sri Guru Parampara that emulate the mood and the method of our acharyas, Rupa Goswami as an example. And that is what Srila Prabhupada gave us in a nutshell of the practices that we have in devotional service. Hare Krishna. Are you all roasted out here? It's pretty hot. Okay, does somebody else have their hand up? 1, 2, 3. Okay, you're there with the mic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
How do we balance our external, Mahaprabhu's external mission and Mahaprabhu's internal mission?
Can you give me
in our practice?
what you mean by that?
Yeah, essentially, basically referring to, for example, why we in ISKCON disapprove of Radha Kund Babajis, for example, or people who just stay in one place and perform their sadhana and bhajan versus going out on Harinam and performing Sankirtan every day. Because what I've noticed is that different...
Wait, I just want to challenge your premise. We don't necessarily disapprove of it, of Babaji-ism. In fact, Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj was Vaishnava Sarvabhauma. He is considered the leader of all the Vaishnavas. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur took shiksha from him as being the leader. He was a Babaji. Gaur-Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. He was also incessantly chanting, and Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta took initiation from him. Prabhupada even gave a Babaji initiation. I was there for it. It was in 1975 in Chicago when my godbrother Udalmi had found out he had a diagnosis that he was going to die, which later on turned out to be wrong. But Prabhupada gave him Babaji, and he said, you stay in one room and you just chant. And don't ask for anything, don't even ask for food. If people bring it, fine. If not, just keep chanting. So that it's not that we're averse to chanting Hare Krishna or Babajis. there are statements by Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta and by Prabhupada, don't mix with Babaji, because there was a hint of contamination in many of the Babajis. For instance, prematurely giving people who are not qualified their siddha deha, or suggesting what it might be, or not having concordance with our previous acharyas in many different ways. So there was still some smarta idea about having to be born in a particular family in order to take to devotional service, which is very pervasive. So just wanted to say the presence premise is not exactly that we don't believe in Babajiism.
Okay. Yeah, I greatly appreciate what you already mentioned. So just to follow up on that, I guess for me, or for me specifically, or like just generally, how should I balance like Harinam Sankirtan versus if I wanted to like practice separately for or personal bhajan?
Well, Prabhupada told a few devotees, he said, if you dedicate 50 years to preaching, I give you my blessings. You can sit down in Mayapur and chant. So put at least 50 years. Vigorous preaching. He said, do as I've done. And even oftentimes when devotees were having some difficulty, this, that, he'd tell them to come and sit down and just chant for some time. But there's a natural synergy between what you're doing, preaching to others, and doing your own bhajan. Because first of all, when you preach Krishna consciousness to others, it pleases Krishna more than any other kind of service. He says it in the Bhagavad Gita, that those who teach the Bhagavad Gita to others are most dear to me. What's more, when you teach other people Krishna consciousness, you can see several things. One is, you'll see people sometimes have a natural reluctance for it. And then you'll notice it in yourself. It's like, oh yeah, I recognize I'm just like that. Or you'll see somebody's great enthusiasm to chant Hare Krishna. For instance, once we were in North Carolina and we were going door to door. I had a group of 7 with me. We went to the door and the person was physically impaired. And there was a big fight he had inside the door with his caretaker. But somehow or other he prevailed, and not only did he buy a book, much against the wishes of the caretaker, but also he gave a donation. And then finally I asked him to chant Hare Krishna. And then the caretaker became so annoyed, she just walked off. And I said the words of the mantra 2 at a time, and it was a strain for him to pronounce them. But he did, and when I turned around, the door closed. The 7 devotees there had tears in their eyes, and I said, what is this? And they said, we wish we had that person's enthusiasm to chant Hare Krishna. They were saying, if I had 1 ounce of enthusiasm to chant the way that person did, then my rounds would be on a much different level. So you see, Prabhupada's mixture of teaching us how to go out and teach Krishna consciousness to others and then take it for ourselves is a perfectly balanced formula that is highly, highly successful. And we did notice that several people went off-road during Prabhupada's times, that noticeably in the Sanskrit department, 8 out of 10 left Krishna consciousness because they thought they knew more once they learned Sanskrit. They thought, what's this? Prabhupada translated this word this way, and they became critical. Also, there was always somebody during the Mayapur Vrindavan festival that would go off-road and say, I'm just going to go down to Radhakund and chant. And generally not generally, absolutely none of them lasted. So better to be humble, live in the association of devotees, and follow the path that Prabhupada gave us. And you're not going to miss anything. That's one of the main points, is everything is there complete in the process itself. Even just chanting Hare Krishna, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Krishna came and got me by the hand personally. So don't be surprised if you're sitting in New York City and Krishna comes and gets you and says, let's go. Because you're dedicating your life to chanting Hare Krishna. Okay, 1, 2. I'll give shorter answers so you all don't roast to death, unless it's too late. Prabhu, you were going to ask? Oh, right behind you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
So I have two questions, if you permit. One is the first, the conversation between Ramandra and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So first he rejected Varnashram Dharma, saying Varnashrama Acharya Purushir Parapatman. So what does this mean? He means that in Kali Yuga, it is not possible to practice, it is a slow process in that sense, or it is because in terms of pure devotional service, so it is not higher process. So what sense he has rejected? In case, so if it is so, then can we apply those Varnashram principles in this age?
Yes, we can apply to some degree. It's called Daivi Varnashram, however, because we're very purposeful in performing the Varnashrama. Dharma swandistita pumsam vishvaksena katasuya notpadiya yadiratim shrama evihi kevalam. Our very Bhagavat says, okay, Varnashram, yes, but if it doesn't lead to a taste for hearing and chanting about Krishna, then it's absolutely, positively, 100% useless. And so it has to be kept in context of how to perform Varnashrama. It just means how to organize people so they can keep it together to be Krishna conscious in the course of their lives and in doing their work. So yes, possible, but the focus has to be there on the goal.
Thank you. There's one more question regarding the association. So in crisp, you can explain about association, what should be the real association?
Real association.
Yes, in the sense like we have in 3 levels of association, like Kanishta, Madhyama and Uttamadhikari. So, and which association we are supposed to take more?
Well, as given in Bhagavat, Sat. Sat means somebody who's truthful, means they're sincere, and we should take as much association with those who are as advanced as possible. Krishneti yasya giritam manasadrita dikshasti chet pranapabhisha prajantamisham shushushaya bhajana vignamananyamanya nindari shunya hridamipsita sangalabhya. Sangalabhya, you should try to gain the association of those who are nindari shunya. They're not so concerned with, they're not concerned at all, they're shunya. They're not envious of other people, they're only engaged in Krishna service. So those uttama adhikaris are very desirable. But sat, any devotee who's sincere and who's following in the footsteps of other devotees, such association is also desirable for us. Main thing is always be prepared to have proper association with devotees. We should offer respect to anybody who can say Hare Krishna, even if they seem to be from the general population. Mahaprabhu says, I take that person as an outstanding person who could even say Hare Krishna. Then he said, if somebody takes Diksha, you should take the time to go and pay them obeisances, because they've taken Diksha. And then after that, he says, then if you find someone, as Prabhupada's purport, he says somebody who's been in the process for a long time, is very steady, and also is empowered to preach Krishna consciousness, also knows Shastra. Those are the 3 verifiable criteria that Prabhupada gives in his purport to that verse. He said, then you should seek their association. Try to get more of that.
Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Okay, who's next? Shastra Sar, sorry it took so long to get back to you.
Hare Krishna.
Circuitous route.
I had a small reflection as well as a request, Marge, for you to elaborate on something. Previously we were discussing the connection between Chaitanya Lila and Krishna Lila, and I was reminded of a direct intersection we could see in Radha Krishna Lila. In Vishnu Thakur, he writes in Ashtakam, in which Srimati Radharani wakes up from a dream, and in the dream she sees a sannyasi with a whole bunch of people with mridangas. And she's very confused because she doesn't know who that person is. And she's telling Krishna that who is this person? I feel attracted to him because he seems like he's you, and he's chanting my name. But then I'm getting confused because he's also chanting your name, and I'm wondering, is that person me? And she gets confused, and Krishna explains to her, and she talks about how in this way both of us together will deliver the whole world by giving love of God. Maharaj, I wanted to ask if you could please elaborate on previously during Shrikara's question, the subject came up of first focusing on the preaching mission and then focusing on bhajan. And I was hoping you could elaborate on how Mahaprabhu shushed Rai Ramanand at the end of the conversation. He puts his hand on his mouth to prevent him from talking anymore, even though it was a topic that was so dear and relishable to him.
Well, both things should go on. That is, the preaching and one's bhajan. As I've told you many times, when I met Prabhupada with a group of Sankirtan devotees, the first thing Prabhupada told us after he heard our book scores was, you must also read my books. I've not written them just for selling. I've written them for you to become pure devotees and go back to Godhead, he said. So he never discouraged us from preaching. In fact, the opposite. He wanted us to increase over and over again and more and more. But he also indicated that he wanted us to increase our hearing and chanting as well. So the two things go well together, as I mentioned before. And regarding the section of the Leela between Ramananda Roy and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, these are the intimate pastimes of Krishna, and who can know them? His most dear devotees can understand. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his revealment of his form of Radha and Krishna to Ramananda Roy, is as significant because Stanestita Shrutikatam Tanavan Mandir Nobir Ye Prayaso Jita Jito Pyasitaistri Lokyam. He can't conceal his identity to the pure devotees. It happens in the pastime, which is often mentioned, and is mentioned by Kaviraj Goswami, that when Krishna was trying to hide from the gopis, they came looking, and then he manifested two more arms and stood as Narayan. And they offered obeisances, and they said, yeah, and have you seen Krishna? Which way did he go? It's also indicated that he could barely hold that form. That's also a symptom of Gopakamar's relationship with Krishna when he goes to Vaikuntha, that although he's there with Narayan, even Narayan is hard put to keep his four-armed stature and keeps manifesting his form as a cowherd boy in Vrindavan because of the presence of his devotee. And the shushing is a kind of expression of amazement that the devotees know everything about Krishna. Is amazed that they know all about his pastimes, and also they are meant for a certain ear. But in the Kali Yuga, something really strange happens. Krishna comes and just broadcasts it to everybody. That's the Charim Shirat. It hasn't ever happened before. He comes and tells about this most intimate exchange he has with his devotees. He wants people to know about it, but he's also it's amazing that it's taking place in such a yuga. Considering the way that our acharyas were extremely careful, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura had kept the topics private and for the ears of those who were qualified. It's depending on adhikari, as we know from the verse, Vikriditam Vrajavadurbirahamcha Viṣṇu Shradhan Vitona Shrinu Yada Taparna Yedya Bhaktim Param Bhagavati Prati Labhyakamam Vrid Rogam Ashvapahinot Yacharina Tiraha. That this is the antidote to lust in the material world. is to hear these intimate pastimes between Krishna and the gopis. However, Shraddhanviton, it has to have proper context. So the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he spoke those types of topics only to Ramananda Roy, Swarup Damodar, and Swarup Damodar, Ramananda Roy, in the Gambhira, underground, in a cave, with the doors closed. For everybody else who's very careful. So it can be taken in a couple ways. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for the wonderful class. Were you thinking of this verse from the 3rd canto when you were speaking about Lord Kapila Dev? Madguna Shruti Matrena Mayi Sarva Guhashaye Manogatir Avichinna Yatha Gangambaso Ambudav Lakshanam Bhakti Yogasya Nirgunasya Hi Udaritam Ahaituki Avyavahita Ya Bhakti Purushottame.
Yes, I was.
Hari Bol. I just
Madguna Shruti Matrena Mayi Sarva Guhashaye means when you're above the modes, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Kapila Dev talks about devotional service in the mode of ignorance, devotional service in the mode of passion, devotional service in the mode of goodness. And then he says when it becomes transcendental, Madguna Shruti Matena, Mai Sarvagahashe, Manogatir Avichnina, Yata Gangam Basum Budao. And then it's a different experience. By hearing, your mind's carried away, and there's no diminishment at any time. It continues always without interruption. Thank you. Lakshana. These are the qualities of bhakti. Yes.
Hare Krishna. So yesterday in the Adi Bhautik miseries, I was thinking of my siblings, right? And today I was really missing them. And I was like, wait, but don't I like get bugged by them? Like, don't they drive me crazy? Why do I miss them? And it kind of like led me to think, it's kind of like that with chanting as well. Like, you know, it's really hard for me to chant. I get really like all over the place when I chant. But when I miss my rounds, like if I miss them, I feel so empty. And I'm just like always wondering why that happens. And then I was thinking, you know, today Guru Ma, she was like giving a class, like she was like telling them how lucky we are to chant. And I was thinking, wow. So Gurudev recently, he was sent to prison in Russia because of the situations there. And he wasn't able to chant. His bead bag was taken away. And in a Govind Charan Prabhuji was telling us how lucky we are to chant. And I was just so happy hearing that. I was like, we really are blessed to be in situations. No one else really gets what we get. Like my classmates and all, they're always so sad. When I see them, they're always like sad. And I feel bad, you know, because like we have so much and it really makes us like happy. And it's really nice seeing that. And yeah, so I was just thinking that. And then there's also another intersection between Chaitanya Lila and Krishna Lila that Gurudev was giving in a Stimulation for Ecstatic Love Beetle Nut series. It is when, I don't know exactly which person it was, but he went into a coma and he woke up in the spiritual world at Radharani's feet. And then I think then some gopi asked him to like massage the feet, and Radharani gave her chewed beetle nut to him. And he woke up immediately after eating that in ecstasy in his material body, I mean in the Chaitanya Lila, and he had that beetle nut in his mouth. I just found that really amazing. So yeah.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you, Maharaj, for the wonderful class. Maharaj, gṛhasthas, what is the way forward, as most of us are dealing with materially only, and we get little association mostly in the weekends only. How we should deal with these things going forward in our spiritual life? Thank you, Maharaj.
Well, weekends are very good. And the Sri Upanishad says, Vidyam cha yas, tad vedo bayam saha, avidyayam ratum tirtva, vidyayam ratum ashnite. Only one who can learn the process of nations and that of transcendental knowledge side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. And if you think of your life, entire life, as a pot of milk, and then you think of the process of how to make dahi. What's the process? You have to get a little dahi and put it inside the milk. And then you put the milk in the proper environment at a certain temperature, and you leave it. And when you come back to it, you'll notice that all of the milk has transformed into yogurt, into dahi. Do you know that? You know how to make dahi?
Yes.
And so in the same way, your weekends, whatever they may be, are that adding to your life. And gradually, it transforms all of your life. You'll have different opportunities at different stages of your life, even as Prabhupada showed by his example. At the time when Prabhupada was working in a family, he went to one of the yātrās of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākura, but he only had one day out of 10 because he was so busy. But in that one day, he took advantage by staying and hearing from his guru. So much so that his guru noticed that here's this person that doesn't go away, that likes to hear. Because half the other pilgrims went away to go to visit a temple. They were given a choice. They were said, some who want to go see Śeṣaśāyī Viṣṇu, you can come now, or you can listen to Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta speak. So many people left. They thought, we'll go see the deity. And Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta commented even, he said, what will they be able to see? But he also noted those who stayed. So it's not necessarily the quantity, because you might find somebody who has access every day to the deities. They live in the ashram. Let's say somebody's in a brahmacārī ashram, but they're thinking, I wish I could go out and see a movie right now. Or you might be living in a gṛhastha ashram, working behind something like a computer screen, and you might be thinking, I wish I was in darśana right now. Which one's better? It's an internal process, and it grows more robust as we develop that desire, that greed. Tata lolyam api mulyam ekalam. When we're held back, sometimes we have more greed because we're thinking, why I can't get anything. This is one of the moods of when we're feeling greedy. So everybody else got something. I can't even get one drop. And we're praying, Krishna, please give me one drop. It's an awakening of this taste that we want more. So that can happen from any ashram, doesn't matter.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, everybody satisfied? No? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So I was just wondering, like a lot of the times when we're reading, like we see Prabhupada saying, to like not follow like the Vedic rituals, and like Krishna says in the Gita, like don't listen to the flowery language of the Vedas. So then, if we're not meant to like, if we're only also told to like mainly focusing on Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, then how come like the Vedas were written, or like wouldn't they just like deter or like confuse some people away from Krishna consciousness?
Yeah, in the Gita, Krishna says in that section, Yavanartha udapane samplutodike. Yeah, he gives this metaphor. In these villages, people would have different wells for different purposes, so they didn't contaminate anything. But then he says, Krishna says, if you have a river, then it doesn't matter all the wells, because you just come to the river and get all your water. So if he says you know the purpose behind the Vedas, then you can derive the ultimate benefit from them. And it's easy enough in any religious process to get carried away by the details and forget the ultimate purpose. Like many people in many religious traditions, they have some ritual that they perform, but they don't know why. It just comes because of cultural momentum. They're born into a certain family and says, we just do this. We always do this on Christmas time. or whatever it might be. Some idea of religion is there. As for the Vedas, they're an all-encompassing project. They reach out to assist all living entities in the material world in their various states in order to bring them back into, which is their purpose, into harmony with their service with Krishna. So then you find that the Vedic process is given more practicality when it comes to the Puranas and the Itihasas. In fact, the Puranas, says Prabhupada, are divided into 3 divisions, so that people in the mode of ignorance, people in the mode of passion, the people in the mode of goodness are accommodated. And it's the Vedas compared to a tree. It's a huge tree. And if you taste, for instance, the bark of a mango tree, you're not going to get much taste of a mango. But it's also necessary because it supports the ultimate purpose of the tree, which is what? It's to create a fruit, right? And so you get this refinement as it's coming down, with the ultimate purpose being to produce the fruit and then to eat the fruit. And we find that in the 3rd verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Nigama kalpataror galitam balam, shukamukharam ritadravasam yutam, pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam, bahuraho rasikabhuve bhavakaha. It's inviting people that finally you have the fruit here, you can take the whole thing. So Krishna's warning, yes, in the Bhagavad Gita, that beware of just following rituals for the sake of following. He said these may also be under the modes of nature. They're meant for a certain class of people, like varnashram, in order to regulate their senses, to take their particular situation and faith and then elevate it to the next level. Just like in the Puranas, there's ideas of worshiping demigods. But in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, just forget all that. You don't have to worship demigods because all the rewards they're giving are coming through me anyway. So why should one worship demigods? Yeah, good question. Why should you? If you come to the revelation that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, that all purposes can be served just by remembering me. Ananda chintayantamam ye jana paripasate tesham nityabdyuktanam yogakshema maham. I'll personally take care of everything. So that's why the Vedas seem disjointed at some point. You have to know their connection, just like you have to know all the different parts of the tree and what its purpose is, and which part is specifically for you, which is the Bhagavat, to drink that juice. Okay?
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you. We have to chant our Gayatri mantras, or can chant Hare Krishna mantra, but we'll just take 7 minutes here by the Godavari. If you haven't had a chance to take some water, take a dip. He said, take a dip. Then get some water, put it on your head, and otherwise we'll do our Gayatris here, and then we'll discuss what the next plan is.